What's up guys, welcome to another tutorial. Today is going to be part 2 of last week's tutorial, or of last Tuesday's tutorial. So if you haven't seen that, you can check it out right here, and that's all about how to get background blur on your phone and kind of make those pictures look a little more background blurred, I guess.
I'm going to use the drift method. Freaking incredible. Round F16 for that to get that sunburst.
Today's video is going to be part 2 of last week's episode, where we're talking all about how to get better images and get those beautiful background blurs with your smartphones. So we did everything that we could do in camera with the phones last week, or last Tuesday, and now we're going to jump into a couple of third-party apps and see if we can enhance that a little bit and just make it a little cleaner and a little nicer. Alright, so I'm going to be looking at 3 different apps for this. So there's probably more out there, and if you guys have any suggestions or anything other than the ones I'm listing, put those in the comments below. But what we're going to look at is I'm going to look at Snapseed, Lightroom Mobile, and Instagram, and we're going to see how well all of those 3 do, and then go through setting it up and doing it. So let's hop into Snapseed first.
Here, and I'm using the same image as I shot in the last video for continuity. So the only thing that we're concerned about is going to be in the tools, and it's going to be this lens blur. So this is a radial blur, and that by default is going to be limiting us a lot. So what you need to do is use both your thumb and your forefinger and pinch them together, and you can maneuver how you need it. So I'm just going to fit this into her face, maybe drag it down a little bit, and then if you swipe up, then you can change this stuff here. I'm going to change the transition and bring that transition down just a little bit, and then I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. So it's really important with these, especially if it's a radial blur, to be careful not to overdo it. So right now I have blur strength at 30, and so you can see what happens if I crank that all the way up. And of course that's atrocious. So we're gonna back that back down, and I really I want subtle but slightly noticeable. So I'm just gonna leave it somewhere around the 25 mark, and then I'm gonna hit OK. So now we can see that's the before and that's the after. And it's not too noticeable, but it does soften up that background a little bit, and you can see around the edges of her face, you can see the problems with the radial blur not being able to tailor to that exactly. So that's really hard if I want the sunglasses in focus and the edges of her face in focus. It's really difficult to pull that off, so that just takes a little bit of finagling, and it's definitely harder to do if you have subjects that aren't quite. This is pretty decent in terms of the shape of what I'm trying to blur out. So you can apply more, or you can go back and tweak the other one. But if I do it something like that now and change the transition and then drop that blur strength just a little bit, so that'll soften up again just around there, and there it is. So that's pretty much all I would do with the radial blur and the lens blurring in Snapseed.
Alright, so that was Snapseed. Now let's take a look at Lightroom Mobile. So let's jump in there.
So again, same image, and the only thing that we're concerned about here is trying to blur out that background a little bit. So let's see what Lightroom Mobile can do. I'm going to go in here to the selective. I'm going to hit this plus button up in the top left, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the brush, and I'm going to paint in all of these areas. So this is nicer in that I can paint it in, and I can choose and be more selective and have a little more control. But you'll see there are some downsides to this here in a minute. Okay, so that's looking good. So now what I'm going to do is go over here to the effects down on the bottom, the third over. I'm going to click on the effects, and I'm going to take that clarity pretty much all the way down. So that's softening up the image. Unfortunately, Lightroom doesn't have a radial blur or a lens blur thing or anything like that, so we're just going to deal with just the clarity. So I'll do a before and after. So there's the before, and there's the after. It doesn't do too much other than just really soften it up, but it doesn't actually blur it out. It just makes it a little less harsh and puts just a little bit more focus on the person. And you can go in there and do another brush and do the same thing, and you can redo that, but it's just gonna compound that effect. So that's really all Lightroom can do at this point, is with the clarity.
All right, and now let's take a look at Instagram. So Instagram is probably gonna be the least technical, especially with how far you can push this and get away with, but they do have a radial blur app, so let's take a look and jump in Instagram.
So I got the image I want. Let's go to next. We're gonna go over here to edit, and we're gonna go to the last thing. I'm pretty sure this is the only way to do it. I don't edit much on Instagram, so if you guys know anything better than me, leave them in the comments. So we're gonna click on the radial, and it looks like you can't, it's a sphere, so it looks like you can't adjust. I'm trying to pinch zoom it and flatten that sphere out to make it more oval shape, but it's not doing that. So I'm just going to get this around her eyes, maybe just a little bit more, drag that just down just a hair, and that looks like it's about it. So it doesn't look like you can even adjust the amount. So I'm gonna hit done, and then we can look at, there's a before and there's the after. So it is very subtle, but it's actually okay. Again, you'd have to be really careful with this. Luckily, I have more of a rounder shape for my subject, which is her head. But if you don't have something round, or if it's, you know, awkward, then the sphere, not being able to tweak that sphere is going to be very limiting. Okay, so I'm going to give this new program a try that somebody just recommended to me, and it's called After Focus. I've never used it before, but let's see what it can do. So I'm going to go with manual because I don't trust the smart thing. Maybe it works, I don't know. Some tips there. So I'm going to start with painting in my subject for the areas that I want to stay exposed. Okay, so now I'm going to go to next. And you can see there's some sort of already thing applied there, so by default it puts it at blur at 50, I guess. So you can see if I crank that up how horrible that looks, but I'm gonna bring it back down like I did on Snapseed and all the other things. Is I'm gonna err on the side of caution and not go crazy with it. I'll increase that feather a bit though. So it definitely can be subtle, and it can definitely be overdone, and I think this is kind of nice. I like being able to paint in. I think that definitely gives you more control. So that's kind of the best thing I've seen. If Lightroom could add the lens blur with the ability to paint in, then they'd have a home run as far as all-in-one editing. But they only have, as we saw, the clarity. So I'm definitely liking this. I think I'll leave it like that and keep it somewhat tasteful, because the whole point of blurring the background is to help your viewer's eyes stay away from the background and focus on the subject. So that's what I think I've done here. So just remember, be tasteful with these. Anything of these after third-party apps that you try to use, just be tasteful with them. Don't push it too hard, because it just starts to look bad real quick.
All right, so that was all three. So you can see they all three have their pros and cons and their differences, but they all do something. And I definitely kind of have been preferring Snapseed lately. I still use Lightroom Mobile a lot. I don't personally do too much editing in Instagram at all, unless it just needs some like contrast or brightening or some little things. But those are the three, and they really can help out. And when done, when you have a good image to start with, then that definitely helps. So hopefully that helps you figure out how to get a little bit better background blur and, you know, kind of declutter your images and get that nicer look. So if you have any questions about any of the apps or anything that I did in those apps, leave those in the comments below and I'll definitely answer them. If you like this stuff and you want to see more, definitely make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because I've got new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.